Folks, listen.
Welcome to another episode of D&M, bringing questions for you that we find interesting. We don't know until the other person says, and bring a mystery to the table for all the generations. Two people from two different backgrounds trying to make sound about the world around us. They both bringing light to the questions they ask. Dina and Michael sliding in your DMs with class. Hey, it's D&M. Hey, it's D&M. D&M. It's D&M. Hey, it's D&M.
Hello everybody and welcome back to episode 16 of Sliding with D&M. This week I have global and Dina has cultural, and she's going to start us off this week.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. How's life been treating you? How's your world going? What's going on?
It's been busy. So this week is finals week for me. So I'm almost done with my sophomore year of college. I'm going to be a junior now. And it's been a ride. It's been tough.
Yeah, this week actually is the opposite for me. I finished my musical season on Sunday. So I am all done with that, and I'm just basically teaching dance classes. So my life kind of came to a little bit of a slowdown, which is the complete opposite of what it sounds like for you. But in my normal everyday job, it's just picking up because it's the end of the school year. But other than that, life is good, treating me well. I can't complain.
Good.
All right. So should we dive in to our questions?
Yeah, why don't you ask your question and
Okay.
let me know what I need to think about. Because I heard that you came a little bit more prepared than I did this week.
I did a little research this week. I typically do a smidgen of research, but I did it earlier in the week and I saved what I wanted to talk about. So it came across actually my Apple News. It came across this article that I found very interesting, and we've touched on it a little bit and talked about a little bit about it, but I just kind of wanted to get more of your perspective, being of the Gen Z or the younger generation. So culturally right now, and this is also a little bit kind of politically too, but I think it also crosses that realm into culture. There is a Supreme Court case that they are hearing about First Amendment rights, in particular with a high school student who was a cheerleader. Mm-hmm. And she kind of posted a profane rant on Snapchat. However, she was off school grounds. And she was upset because something had happened and had occurred. And she was like, F this school, F the cheerleaders, just kind of showing her emotions. And she posted it on Snapchat. And according to that, she violated, because all schools have different policies in place about things of what you can and cannot say. She violated school policies and school rules. So because of that, the girl was suspended from the JV cheerleading team for violating those school rules. So my question for you is, how do you feel about that? Like, how do you feel? Because we live in such a heavy social media age right now with Snapchat, Twitter. I'm old, so I still use Facebook, Instagram. How do you feel, like, especially for kids or young adults that are kind of in that Gen Z? It's a way to express themselves. They have TikTok. It's a way to express themselves. Do you think that schools have kind of this right to kind of police what students say off campus grounds or off school grounds? And should students be allowed to kind of express themselves a little more freely on these social media platforms?
So it's interesting that you talked about this, because I actually read into this a couple days ago, so I'm a little bit familiar with what you're talking about.
Really? Okay. Lay it on me. I want to hear what hear your thoughts on this.
So it's obviously a Supreme Court case right now. They're going to hear it and they're going to give arguments, and then the justices are going to decide. And one of the things I know that has heavy precedent in this case is during the Vietnam War, middle schoolers started wearing the peace armbands to protest the war. And that ended up going to the Supreme Court because the school districts suspended the students, and the students said that it violated their First Amendment rights to free speech and protest. So what ended up happening was the Supreme Court decided that since they are not disturbing students in school, right, an armband, you wearing an armband does not disturb the learning process. It is
Mm-hmm.
protected under the First Amendment. So schools have the right to, um, I don't want to say take away your First Amendment, but to overrule the First Amendment
Okay.
when you are disrupting the classroom, right?
Okay.
So if you get up in the middle of class and you start yelling and screaming and while the teacher's teaching, right? And you're obviously disrupting the learning process for everybody else. The school has the right to suspend you for that reason and take away your free speech in school, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's interesting to me because the most important thing to note is that the young woman who was on the JV cheerleading team, she did it after school, and she didn't. From I saw the picture, the Snapchat that she posted, um, and it was just basically like f the school, f the cheerleading team, like it's all rigged, like blah 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 blah. So in my opinion, it didn't seem threatening in any way.
Mm-hmm.
um I don't think that, obviously it's not like she probably shouldn't have done it, like she probably should have kept her calm and not said anything because it is a little bit, unprofessional, I guess. But she's a middle schooler, so it's not surprising. We all have done
Yes.
stupid stuff when we were young. um I find it interesting that it's gone this far without being decided in her favor in the first place. I don't know who
Well,
escalated it.
let me pause and say
Okay.
that the girl actually did win in the lower courts.
Okay,
Um,
that's what I
in
was. I'm surprised that it's gone up to the Supreme Court in
so
the first place.
the district courts had found that the school had not shown that she had waived her free speech rights as a condition of joining the team. So in the lower courts, she was like her suit was validated.
Hmm.
Um, but then now it has kind of, gone up and escalated, and now we're at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think there's very little chance of the school district winning this one, just because the Supreme Court right now is a majority conservative court, and conservatives tend to advocate for constitutional rights more than the progressives do. But in this case, I would be surprised if even the progressives sided with the school. I think it's going to be interesting either way to hear their arguments and hear their reasoning behind it. But usually, when there's a Supreme Court case that has precedent, um, unless the Supreme Court goes back and re-looks at that case, reopens that case, and they decide the opposite ruling, so they change that precedent. Usually, the precedent holds, and this case sounds very similar to when the middle schoolers were protesting the Vietnam War. So I would be super surprised if the school district ended up winning. Um, I really don't see it happening. I think it's a solid bet for this girl to win.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. All right. Well, so I'm going to kind of give you my perspective from two places: working in education and also still having two kids. Well, I have three kids that are in school, but in particularly, I have two that are in K through 12.
Hmm.
So, as the perspective from a mom, and as you know, my middle son, he does participate in sports. He's heavily active in cross country and track. So, that is one of their code of conducts. Like they have to follow a social media policy. Um,
Hmm.
and if it is violated, there are consequences. So, as a mom, I understand why those policies are in place because it prevents a whole host of other things. And I also want to kind of say this little interesting tidbit. My middle son is very relaxed, let's say, I guess is the best way I can describe it. He typically kind of goes with the flow and is very chill. And so the other day we were talking, we were speaking about something, and he said to me, I said something about, oh, Facebook or Instagram. I was like, did you tell your friends? And he's like, I don't have those things anymore. And I was very surprised. And I said, you don't? He's like, yeah, he's like, the only thing I have now is Snapchat. And he's like, the only reason why I keep Snapchat is because it's faster and quicker for me to communicate with his core group of friends than sending a text. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. And I said, so you're telling me that you got rid of TikTok, Instagram, he never really had a Facebook or Twitter. And he's like, yeah, I deleted all those things. He's like, what's the point of having those? And I thought that was very interesting that he was self aware to know that those things can cause issues. And I'm not saying that social media is bad, because that's the world we live in and that's how we keep in touch with people. That's how we give updates. That's how we connect with people, especially now that we're in a pandemic. So social media is not a horrible thing. Like, if you use it properly and use it for what it's intended to do, it's great. So as a mom, I understand why those policies are in place. From the educator piece side, I look at it as, okay, yes, this girl said inappropriate things. However, in the world that we live in, it can come off as threatening, whether she meant it to be threatening or not. Does that make sense? And so I look at it as like, we're so highly sensitive and in tune to what is the next tragedy that's going to happen, or how can we avoid the next tragedy, which it shouldn't be that way in public education. Like, we shouldn't have to worry about what's the next tragedy that's going to happen. How can we protect our kids from the next tragedy? Because it's unfortunate that we've had so many. But here's this girl, and we all know that middle schoolers, they're in that weird space. You were a middle schooler once too. That weird space where you're not quite a kid, you're not quite an adult, but you're trying to figure out how to express yourself and when to do what. And sometimes you just don't have control of your emotions. I mean, I have a middle schooler. My daughter's a middle schooler, so I get it. But there's a fine line, and we have to figure out, how can we allow these kids to express themselves freely, yet not feel like every time they express themselves, they're going to be looked at as, is it threatening? Is it harmful? Could it potentially be threatening? When I kind of agree with you a little bit, I didn't see the actual text or the rant or whatever she posted on Snapchat, but
Mhm.
really, was she just venting? Right? Was she truly just venting? And so I'm very interested to see what they say, the Supreme Court says, because I think it will change a lot of things. Um, if schools aren't able to have these policies in place that they do now, I think we're going to see a lot of change and a lot of differences on how school handles the current social media policy of what's going on. And let me just be clear, like, if you're posting derogatory things and you're trying to bully other students or be mean to other students intentionally, yes, you should absolutely get in trouble. Like, unequivocally get in trouble. Like, there's no need for that. That's not the true purpose of social media. If you're going to be bullying, unkind, mean, rude to other people intentionally, then there should be some consequences. But I feel like we have to find a balance of, when can kids just allowed to be kids to express themselves, and especially middle schoolers, because they're trying to navigate all these different feelings and they don't know how. And if we suppress that, is that worse than allowing them to express it freely? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think I disagree with you a little bit, just because um, I feel as though, like, there's a lot of speculation in what you just said. Like, the school could speculate that she was going to, like, shoot up the school or whatever, but the Supreme Court and all courts are not going to listen to speculation. There's no proof of that, right?
Yeah.
So the school district can claim whatever they want, but it's all going to be thrown out. And at this point, they've already made all their claims. The Supreme Court is just going to hear their individual arguments and make a decision. But I mean, I'm a firm believer in that you should have free speech. And in the US, you're protected under the First Amendment to have free speech. And I think you should have free speech up until the point when you are putting others in danger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be mentally or physically, when you're putting others in danger, I think that's when the free speech, the First Amendment kind of gets thrown away for everybody else's safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in my opinion, um, she was just being a middle schooler. Like in all
Yeah.
honesty, like she was just upset that she did not get into the varsity cheerleading team, and she went off a little bit, obviously in a very emotional state. Started saying "f this," "f the school," "f the cheerleading team," and when you read over it, she sounds angry, but it's not like she's not like "f the cheerleading team. I'm gonna come and shut everything down tomorrow." You know what I mean? Like it's nothing extreme like that. That I believe that the school should take away her First Amendment rights, and
Mm-hmm.
I just think that it's starting to give school districts too much power, because in real life, you know what I mean? Like if I'm in the workplace and I start going off on my job, right, on social media,
Uh-huh.
they're not gonna, you know what I mean? Like they can punish me in some ways, but they're it's just different. You know what I mean? Like they're not gonna kick me off a team. There is no team in your job. You just get fired and that's it. But it would be very interesting to me if we put the same situation in a business that attempted to take away your First Amendment rights, how that situation would carry over to Supreme Court, because I would assume that it would be a huge thing. People would be like, oh, this business is too powerful. They're trying to take away their employees' First Amendment rights. And that crap would be shut down real quick, right? But because
Mm-hmm.
it's a place of learning, I feel like they're given a little bit of a pedestal, especially because it is our future generations. So I think we're starting to overstep what school districts are, because I remember being in high school and in middle school, there's a lot of policing that goes around, right?
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
you can't wear this, you can't do this. Girls aren't allowed to wear tank tops because for some reason men are attracted to tank tops and then they don't learn, and that's going to cripple our entire educational system. You can't say this, you can't do this. You know what I mean? You can't sit here, you can't walk here, you can't go to the bathroom without asking. It's just it's too much. You know what I mean? It's not real
Yeah.
life. We're supposed to be treating these kids and getting them ready for the real world, but there's too much in place to where it feels like you're just in a bubble, right? People are
Mm-hmm.
always telling you what to do and you have to comply.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just saw this case and I was very interested. I'm like I said, I work in education, so I'll be very curious to see what the decision is. I think you stated it perfectly earlier. The question is, can the school prove that she was a disruption to the learning environment, even though she was off campus when she said those things? That's
Hmm.
really what it boils down to. And obviously, in the lower court, she did have support on her side, and they were like, no, and it's like you said, the lower courts kind of felt that she was just a middle schooler being middle schooler, right? Just
Hmm.
ranting. We all know that kids swear, right? For the most part,
Yeah.
they use the F word. Should they be using it? It's up to your parents. You talk to your parents about it, how you speak in your home or whatever. But we all know that kids use inappropriate language when they hit like I'm going to even go on the young side, like 10, 11, 12, right? It's that age where you're trying to be, am I cool enough to say the word, excuse my language, fuck? Or am I not cool
Hmm.
enough, right? They get around their friends and they're like, F this, F that. Even if they're talking about like, it was effing crazy, man. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
just, kind of start to build in their vernacular everyday language. And so
Hmm.
I'm just curious to see what the result will be if the Supreme Court will decide, hey, schools can't really police police certain things unless it's intentional, where it's bullying, it's hurting, it's harming, or it's disrupting, and what
Yeah.
that line will be. I'm curious to see, but I see both sides of it as a person that works in education, but I also see the side of it as a person, you know, that's a mom to two kids that are still going through K through 12, why those things are in place. So
Hmm.
anyway, that was my question. That was,
Yeah,
and
that
by
was
the way,
fun.
people, let me just be clear. Like, we are serious when we say that we don't talk about our questions or what we're going to discuss. So I found it interesting that you were a little bit of aware, like you had seen this as well, even though we didn't talk about our questions. Like, we are truly serious when we say we don't talk about our question. We don't even mention like what we're going to talk about or what we're going to say. So it's
Hmm.
just funny that we kind of were both on the same wavelength of, we saw this question and it just piqued my interest, just because, we live in a world of social media, and what we post and what we say, it's out there. And just know that I always try to post things that are kind, um, just because I feel like people need a little bit of joy, especially now. And so why not give them a little bit of joy? Anyway, that was my question. Thanks for
Yeah.
entertaining me.
I had just like to just give some background to how I kind of knew about it. I followed the ACLU on Twitter, and I believe they tweeted something about it, or maybe I saw it somewhere else. But somebody had made the comparison to the previous Supreme Court case that I mentioned about the middle schoolers and protesting the Vietnam War, and that to me it just draws so many similarities, right?
Yes.
Looking at how powerful schools can be when the First Amendment is in place. So to me, I feel like it's a very solid case in the little girl's favor. I would be very surprised if they ruled in the school district's favor, just because, like I said, precedent usually holds. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So we'll see. I mean, I definitely think she's going to win, though. I don't think that there's a very large chance for the school district to win. If the school district does win, then I think a lot of people are going to be very confused and possibly shocked at the fact that they have a case that has precedent and they broke precedent, because that doesn't happen very often, if at all.
Yes, that is true. That does not very happen very often, very all at all. Gosh, oh my goodness, my tongue's tied. So no, I'm glad that we got to talk about this. So I'm glad that this is something on your radar. So we'll have to, maybe when they make a ruling, we'll have to like just quick do a recap and say, remember episode 16 that we talked about, and revisit it and see how it goes and kind of see what they say. So I think, like you said, though, the biggest part is going to be, can the school prove that this girl was a disruption off campus, outside of school, to the learning process? That's the
And I
big
think
question
in
mark.
one of the lower courts, I think they did side with the school district once, because it's been escalated 2 or 3 times for sure, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I think in one of the lower courts they did side with the school district, and that court had seen enough evidence that it did disrupt the learning environment. And I feel like possibly, I mean, I can kind of see it too, like to where kids maybe don't come to school because they're scared that this girl may shoot up the school or whatever. You know what I mean? But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think there's enough evidence for it to actually hold in court. You know?
Yeah. We'll have to we'll have to see. Anyway, should we
Yeah.
hear your question? I'm curious to hear
Yeah.
your question.
We can move on to mine. So I have global, and you kind of talked about a little bit of a question relating to education, and mine is actually about education, which is kind of funny. So this is an educational episode. Um, I have been thinking a lot about this, and it's something that I think bothers a lot of my generation. So I have student loans out. That's how I'm paying through school, right?
Yes.
And in the last couple years, the topic of paying for higher education, or free higher education or subsidized higher education, or comparing it to the European model of like university and college has come up a lot in politics, right? Obviously,
Okay.
you have the more extreme version where you have Senator Bernie Sanders who wants to become president and make higher education free for all, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
then you have the more subdued people who say the system works right now. You just have to pay for it how you can and then slave away the rest of your life paying your loans out, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So, my question, we can kind of take it in two parts, maybe. So, for the global part, what system globally do you know about that appeals to you and that you think can be reinstated in the US? And should we change our higher education system, and why? Those are
Okay.
my questions.
So, to answer your first part, I'm not necessarily familiar with any global system, but I
Mm-hmm.
do know this. When you look at statistics and things, countries like Sweden, Denmark, they are clearly successful in doing something right,
Mm-hmm.
as far as education goes. Um, so that's kind of, I feel like maybe something similar. I'm not familiar with the ins and outs of their educational system, but I just know when you
Mm-hmm.
look at studies and you see studies, those countries seem to be doing rather well in educating their population, making sure that it's affordable and or free. Um, and they seem to have a really good output of people that then find successful jobs. So that's kind of the answer to your first part.
Mm-hmm.
The second answer to your second part is, should we change the system? Absolutely, we should change the system. And here's why. And I say this because I currently have my oldest is a student at a local college here. He did 2 years at a community college, which is right here in our local town. And then he transferred to a university that's a little bit farther away, not far, but it's still within driving distance. And he commutes actually 2 days a week um, to class. But yes, we should. I've said it before and I've said it again. The fact that you have 21-year-old kids, and I say kids, but you really are still babies, kids coming out of school with the debt the size of a small mortgage, right? By the time all is
Mm-hmm.
said and done and you pay it back, you're basically paying off a small house, like a starter house, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you're coming out with the hopes that you will find a decent job to pay your bills. And when I say pay your bills, when I say bills, I'm talking about the necessities. You need a car payment. You need insurance for that car. You have to pay for your gas. You have to pay for your groceries. Um, you also have to, I'm assuming, rent, right? I'm going to go rent on
Mm-hmm.
this side. Rent. Or if you're fortunate enough, maybe you have some money stashed away somewhere, buy a house. But then, even with rent or buying a house, water, sewer, trash, what else? Electric, heat and hot
Mm-hmm.
water. Those are all, and also in the age that we live in now, very few people I know, or very few of my friends, still have a home line. Like my parents still have a home line. They're old school like
Mm-hmm.
that. But most people don't have a home line anymore. So you need to have to also, when I say in your necessity of bills, your cell phone, your internet, right? So because you
Mm-hmm.
have to have your internet, especially now, things are remote. Most people aren't even in an office building. They're working from home, so you have to log into the system so then you can do the job that you need to do. And then as far as your cell phone goes, I mean, you need that to call, make dial. Some people use their internet and connect that to their cell phone, so and do whatever they need to do on their cell phone, because basically your cell phone is pretty much a mini computer. So
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, we need to change it. I think it's crazy. I'm glad that my son made the choice to go to college. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have made the choice. I've always been one that the choice is yours, what you decide to do. I just know that I need you to be a productive human, meaning whether you take a gap year and you travel to figure your life out, you go to a community college for 2 years and then you work and then you decide to go to a 4 year university. You go to a 4 year university, or you just get a job. Like, you just need to be a productive human. And I think us asking 21-year-old students to come out of college with an insane amount of debt is asinine. It's really asinine. Um, and I strongly feel that way. Um, my son he'll save a little bit of money because he did do 2 years at a community college. So all those general education courses that you would take at a 4 year university are a little bit cheaper at a community college. But he worked with his community college because the 4 year university he was transferring to would accept those credits. So he wasn't just willy-nilly picking credits and then hopefully they will transfer. They worked hand in hand in our college system of where we live, so that all those credits he took at community college then just transferred over to the 4 year university he attends now. So I think we have to do something. Like, it's just crippling. A while ago, I watched, probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I watched a documentary about lawyers. Now, we know that lawyers typically are in the higher end of the pay scale, right? But these were lawyers that just passed the bar, they got a job, and they couldn't afford to live. By the time they paid their student loans, they paid the necessity of their bills. And then some of them, they started out renting, but because they couldn't afford to live, they had to move back in with their parents because they couldn't afford the basic bills. Yet here they are, they have a 4 year degree plus a law degree, and they can't afford to live. Like, the one girl was like, I literally have $10 to my name and $5 I'm going to put in gas in my car so I can go see my next client. Isn't that crazy? That's crazy to me. Like, you have spent thousands upon thousands of dollars. You have $10 to your name and $5 you're going to use to put gas in your car so you can go see your next client, but you're not sure how you're going to eat tomorrow. Like, it's just not right. It's so not right. And I'm a big person also. I also believe that secondary education or higher education is not for everyone at that moment in time. You have to go to college when it's right for you. So I think this push for a long time in public education, where when you graduate, you need to go to a 4 year institution or some type of higher education. No. Why would you force that on someone if that's not what they want to do? Two, if they're not sure that's not what they want to do, because then they're paying money for something they're not sure of. And if they wind up hating it, guess what? It's not free. They still have to pay that money back. And three, if they're not ready, why force that on someone if they're not ready? It's okay to take some time to figure out what you need. You are 18. You have plenty of time to figure out what you want to do. I have friends, as you know, I'm 42. I have friends that went to college and they started in one degree field and they got to their 30s and they were like, yo, this is not what I want to do anymore. Not even remotely close. And they went back to school and they are now doing something completely opposite, on the opposite end of the spectrum than what they were doing before. Not even remotely close to what they went to school for, what they graduated for, and what they did their job for and their career in for a little bit. But they wound up not liking it. And so they went back to school and they're doing something else. And that's okay too. But the fact that, we've had conversations about this before, that it saddens me that you are going to a wonderful university, a great university that gives good education. But when all is said and done, you're going to come out with $100,000 worth of debt. That is literally a small house. That's a small house. And
you don't have to tell me. It stresses me out. You don't have to tell me.
Well, I know it stresses you out. It stresses me out. Like, it literally stresses me. It stresses me out. And I'm not even in school. I just feel for your generation that we have kind of saddled this on you, right? and it shouldn't be that way. Now, granted,
Mhm.
listen, I totally agree that we need to pay teachers more because they are worth their weight in gold and they're helping to shape young minds. But I think we also have to find a balance where, like, we can't ask 21-year-old kids to shoulder that amount of debt, right? And there are those that are fortunate where their parents, start saving, and from when they're not even when they're in the womb, parents start saving and putting money away so they have the resources to go to college, right?
Yeah,
When
but
they
let's talk about
graduate.
that a little bit, because
But
I
then
think
there are
that
some, yeah, but hold on. But then there are some that they can't afford to do that. They're trying to figure out how they're going to put food on their table next week,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So is that realistic? Not really. Yes and no. If your parents have two good paying jobs and are able to do that, great. Awesome. But if your parents don't have two good paying jobs and aren't able to do that, and you have to shoulder the majority of the funds for how you're going to go to higher education, it's
Hmm.
just not feasible. Okay, go ahead. Say what you're going to say.
Let's talk about that for a minute, right?
Okay, go
Because
ahead. Go ahead.
I have never heard of that. I've never heard of
Really?
people saving. Well, I obviously in the last few years I have heard of it, but when I was a kid, that has never been something that I've heard about. So my parents grew up in the Soviet Union, right? Obviously,
Yes.
they were under a system of communism, right? Socialism,
Mm-hmm.
communism, and higher education was free. You just had to put in the effort to do it, right? So
Okay.
there, if you fail a class, right, you just retake it. Here, if you fail a class, you're thinking, shoot, well, I just spent $3,000 taking that class and that's down the drain. So now
Yeah.
I'm another 3 grand in debt, right? Because I have to retake the class. So
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, the way I think about it is that I am investing myself to get a higher education, right? To provide more, right? Me going into the workforce after this is going to give into the economy, right? The future, we're going to be the ones that are problem solving. We're going to be the ones that are running for office, and we're going to be the ones who are running the entire country, right? We're the ones who are
Okay.
going to be working. So, in my opinion, I feel like higher education should be free for those who want it, just because you're investing in the future, right? The country is investing in you to develop the nation further. You don't
Mm-hmm.
get astronauts and scientists and doctors, lawyers, right? All the crazy intellectuals of the country without investing in them in the first place. So I just find it kind of nuts that there are probably really, really smart, intelligent people who just can't afford to go to college and really do nothing all their lives because they never had the resources to succeed, right?
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
we're already missing out on that population of people. And for the population that does go and that does take out student loans, they're predatory, right? So I take out student loans while I'm in college. I'm not paying them because I can't afford to pay them. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to live, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're accruing interest. When I graduate, I have 6 months before the first payment arrives in my mailbox, and I have to pay the first payment. As I'm still paying, they're still accruing interest. So you get to a point where you're just paying the interest off. You paid off your loan a long time ago, right? And now you're
Mm-hmm.
just paying off the interest on the loan. And the thing that's sad is that I hear oftentimes a lot of people are making the minimum payments, but it's not doing anything to the balance because they racked up such a high tally and the interest rate was so high that
Yes.
every month that the interest accrues, it's basically the same as their minimum payment, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
$50 less. So they're making a $50 dent on their $900 $1,400 payment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's nuts to me that you have people who are spending thousands of dollars every month, basically paying off their student loans. And to the people who say like, "Oh, forgiving student loan debts, that'll cripple the economy and blah, 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 right? I mean, it won't, just because that money that's freed up is going to be reinvested into the economy anyway. I want to be able to go out and purchase goods. I want to be able to go out and do stuff and give to the local communities and the local businesses. But if I have a $1,400 a month student loan payment, by the time, like you said, I pay rent, all my utilities, if I can afford a car payment and car insurance, gas and maintenance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Food. By the time you pay all of that, I don't have anything even left to save, let alone go buy. And that's not even counting stuff like buying clothing or buying, the things that aren't really necessities, but most people have, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just, it's tough. It really is, because you're not only, I mean, you're asking kids who are my age to go to school and get a higher education. First of all, we're in a global pandemic. So school is already nuts as it is. It's already
Yes.
insanely difficult, and there's a lot of mental strain just with the pandemic, being at home, not seeing friends. You do work 7 days a week, whether it's even just for like a couple hours a day. I work 7 days a week. You know what I mean? I don't think I've had a day off of school since Christmas break, right? We also, our university decided that we weren't going to have any breaks. So we've been going straight through since January 20 something is the first day we started. So I haven't had a break in like 3.5 months ish. It's just, it's kind of nuts. It's a lot. You know what I mean? So if you're in a global pandemic, and I mean, I'll be the first to say that motivation is super low. Finals week is here. And I have not only seen it myself, but from all my friends, everybody's saying that it's so hard to do that final push. We're so burnt out, right?
Yes.
But on top of that, what I worry about is, if I don't do well in this class and my GPA is not good enough, then I'm not going to get a good enough job. Or if I don't do well in this class and I fail, then I just wasted $3,000 in 3.5 months of my life, and I'm going to have to retake this in the summer or retake this next term, right? So it's just a lot of added stress on top of trying to be a productive citizen, on top of being educated and trying to better yourself and the country in the future, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm conflicted about it. I feel like a system similar to Sweden's would be nice, where education is free. I also would love to see, if that is not possible, because I know a lot of people don't support free higher education, I would love to see caps on tuition prices and housing prices from universities, because I think that a lot of the universities know this, and it's kind of a scam. Your first year, you're basically, as a freshman, you're required to live on campus, right? And they say that this is for, to make it easier to make friends, to become part of the community. And it is part of that. But the university doesn't care about you making friends and about you being part of the community. They care about that money. And you're spending, like my university, my freshman year, I took out, I think, like $35,000 in loans. So I paid $18,000 for a year's worth of tuition, and then whatever was left over, another 17 or whatever, was
your housing
for
costs.
Housing and food. Yeah. So you're paying like $6,000 to $7,000 for housing and food for 3.5 months.
Yeah.
Which is kind of nuts. Like that is kind of a lot. Like it does not make sense to me at all. So that part of it, where you're making freshmen take out $35,000 in loans just because you're making them live on campus. They don't have a choice. Otherwise, you're not allowed to live off campus and just commute, unless you live with your parents, which oftentimes college kids don't, because they want to get away from their parents. They don't go to school in nearby home.
Yeah. My son's just weird like that.
Yeah.
Thanks, that. You know him well. He is a little quirky, but we love him though. We do love him.
It's all right. It's okay. So I don't know. I would just love to see if the government stepped in and said, "Listen, this is getting out of control." You know what I mean? It's not sustainable anymore.
So,
You're
yeah.
you're crippling kids in the future. That's what it is. It's about being indebted to these loan companies for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? I shouldn't be paying student loans till I'm 40 years old. I think that's crazy.
Yeah. So you said a couple things. So the first thing is that I looked up online. So in 2021, 2022, the average tuition for a public university is about 30, I'll round down, $32,000. That's public.
Yeah.
The average
Hmm.
tuition for a private university is $64,000.
Hmm.
That's for a year. Now, let's do some math here. We're going to do the public university. Let me get my calculator out, people. So 32,000 times 4, that's 128,000. That's public. You are paying $128,000
Hmm.
to get a piece of paper. And I say it's I know it's important. It's more than just a piece of paper because it's an accomplishment that you earned. But I'm going to tell this story about my husband. So, my husband, as you know, he did a little bit of school and then he left school. He met me, we got married, and then, we moved back here. And so, 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, he decided to go back to school and get his degree. So he went to a local university around here and he did. He went back to school. And so he got his degree and he was looking for jobs and applying for what his degree was in and what he needed to do. And so he took around here when you want to work in government jobs, you have to take the civil service test. You get a certain score in the civil service test and then you kind of go in their database and then other government local agencies and counties can look at test scores when you take the civil service test and see kind of like that's like the pre-screen. And then they do the first interview. And then if you pass the first interview, then they ask you to come back for like a second final interview.
Hmm.
So this is how he got the job of what he does now. So took civil service tests. They were like, hey, would you be interested in working? Da da da. Send us your resume. This. Goes that, gets the first interview, does the first interview. So then they have him come back for the second interview. And it was a panel of people that interviewed. And he said it was very interesting because not once did they ask him about what he went to school for, what he did. They didn't ask him any of that. They asked him questions situationally about what he would do in this situation when he was working with different clients, and then also how he would react to office situations.
Hmm.
When jobs are looking for you, yes, that degree is important, but they want someone that's going to fit in the climate of their office. Is that person going to be a detriment to the office morale? And how will they fit in and work within this group of people? And he wound up getting the job. And he's been there 4 years now, 5 years now doing what he does. But I thought that was interesting because I said, oh, how'd the interview go? Did they ask you about what college classes you took and what year? And he's like, they didn't ask me anything about my schooling. He said it was all about how would you handle this situation when you're with a client, or how would you handle this situation with your client? And then he said a lot of the questions were also based on how would I react in certain office situations, which I
Hmm.
thought was very interesting. That yes, the piece of paper is important, but at the end of the day, it really is just a piece of paper. It's how are you going to contribute to the office environment and contribute to that business that's going to make them more successful, right?
Hmm.
And that's what it boils down to. So I think I agree with you. I think it's crazy that it's $128,000 to go to school. Like, that is literally the price of some townhouses in our local area. Like, for real.
Yep.
You know
Yep.
that? And then the other thing that's crazy too, like you talked about, is the whole housing situation. Like, my oldest, because we were in a pandemic, he elected to live at home because there wasn't going to be anything open on campus. And right now he's kind of contemplating, like, do I want to go move on campus because at this point, looking at his schedule, he's really only going to be down at the university that he needs to commute to about 2 days a week again, even though all their classes are in person. Some of them are still online. And so he's like, what's the point of me living on campus?
Hmm.
I can save myself 10 grand and
Yep.
pocket that money and do other things with it than staying on campus. And so he's kind of in this juxtaposition right now of trying to figure out, do I want to live on campus? Do I not want to live on campus? Do I want to just commute every day? Or the other option for him is, do I want to look for an apartment? Do you know what I mean? And so I think all of these things have to be taken into consideration. But we've got to do something. Like it's just not good. And I I see the mental stress. It's already stressful for you guys. And the fact that we're adding more mental stress on top of that, I just think it's just not good. It's just not
Hmm.
good. And one thing we have to make sure is that kids are just starting out their life and trying to do, accomplish things. So how can we saddle them with $128,000 worth of debt? And by the way, you have that 6 month grace period in the hopes that you will find a job in 6 months.
Oh yeah.
If
Yep.
you don't find a job, that bill still comes due. And trust me, you hear those stories all the time. If you don't pay your student loan debt, wherever job you're working at, they will quick snatch that money and garnish your wages because you don't pay
Hmm.
your student loan debt. Like it's
Hmm.
not. So the fact is that, and by the way, if you do find a job, you know that you are making, it's your first job. You're not making the upper echelons. You're making the bare minimum. The bare
Yeah.
minimum. So, no, I agree with you. I've said it before. I've said it a lot that we have to change how we fund education, especially higher education. There has to be a change. And I do like the idea of having 2 years of free community college. But I think
Hmm.
there has to be some stipulations with it. Like I know some states are saying, okay, we'll give you 2 years of free community college, but then you have to live and work in our state for 2 years. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like that's a fair trade, right? If we're gonna
Hmm.
give you something for free, then you gotta live in our state and work in our state, because then you're paying taxes back into, you know what I mean? You're paying back into the system. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a fair trade, but we have to figure something out because at the rate we're going, I mean, the fact that, you know, a public university is $32,000 and a private university is 64, that's
Hmm.
just, it's crazy, and where
Well,
do all
then
those costs go?
that's not even the end of all your costs either, because then you buy textbooks, right? McGraw-Hill, that company, being in education, they
Mm-hmm.
make university textbooks too. Some of their textbooks are $600 for one book.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
So that's
Right.
not the end, and you're still taking out student loans for that too. Can you just afford a $600 out of nowhere payment? No, you're going to take out a loan for it.
No.
So,
So, yeah, no, it's funny. My oldest, he he had to order a digital download for a book that he
hmm,
needed, right?
yep.
And so, and I am one that I will help you. Like I have no problem. The main part of college costs, I feel like you're an adult, it's your responsibility, right? You are choosing to go to school, so you need to shoulder that responsibility. I will help you, but I'm not going to be the one to take the full brunt of that. Like this is a choice. You don't have to go to school. I say it all the time. So, but I'm willing to help. So he needed this book, right? And so I was like, "Oh, and I've always been willing to pay for his books. I get it. You like you said, $600 for a book." So it was a digital download, and I was like, "Okay." So in my head, I was like, "Well, they don't have to mail you anything. They're just going to send you an email with a link to the book. You click on
No,
it,
you still
and then
pay $200 for it. No,
it was 150.
yeah,
It was
yep.
150 for the digital download. And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, how much is the actual hard copy book?" He's like, "Well, that's 225." And so, but I understood why he wanted the digital download, so then he would always have it and he didn't have to carry a book. But I'm sitting here thinking, It is a digital download. You are literally going to send him an email that he's going to click on to open the book, and the pages are going to be right in front of him. You don't have to send him anything. It's already, and you're going to still charge me $150 for the digital download.
Mm-hmm.
That you're just not going to get back. Like,
welcome to college in 2021. Nice to see you.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So anyway, well, that was a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of a rant because those are my own like personal, things that I think about sometimes. Sometimes I lay in bed and get anxiety about my student loan payments in the future. But doesn't everybody else? It brings us together as a community. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, no, I think I know this time of year is very stressful. I'm watching, my oldest go through it as a college student like you, and I'm watching my middle one as a soon to be high school senior kind of go through it too. Everybody's tired.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's burnt out. Everybody's ready to be done because we've been doing school in a pandemic world since essentially March of last year. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really, there was that 3 or 4 weeks where everything was shut down, but then pretty much after Easter or spring break for most people, school kind of picked up, right? And they figured out ways to do it, and this is what we've been doing. And everybody's at teachers, students, administration, staff, everybody's at the tipping point. And we just have to, we're trying to push through as best we can. It's hard, but everybody is doing the best that they can. But I do feel for you. You know that I do, because I have said it before and I said it again. Like, college is just way too expensive. And
so is this you saying that if you ever come into a large sum of money that you're going to pay off my loans? Because that's what I'm hearing.
I will gladly help you, but I have to help my oldest first. I have to help my other
I don't
two.
come first. That's kind of sad.
Did you say that's kind of sad? Oh my goodness.
Kind of sad.
I would help you out in a heartbeat. I would help you out in a heartbeat. So if you like the things that we're discussing and that we're talking about, please feel free to let us know. Please let us know your thoughts on the topics we talked today. We talked a lot about education in the education realm, but that's okay. And we have these dialogues to discuss our different views. We may not always agree, but it's how we learn from each other and how we essentially become better humans, because we're learning and we're talking and discussing, and that's the most important thing. I'm Dina McKell.
And I'm Michael Petzuhoff.
And this is Sliding with D&M.
Thank you guys for listening. We hope to see you next week.